welcome to Meet the Maker. Today I'm talking to the fabulous Becky from William and Tilda. So Becky, I'm going to let you introduce your business because the name doesn't say what you do. So come on, tell me, where did the name come from? What do you do? I know you've got a really fabulous niche. Tell us all about it.
I'm Becky. Good morning. William and Tilda. The name came from my daughter and her teddy bear.
Ooh.
And it's actually nothing to do with the business at all.
When you came up with the name then, did you know what your business was going to do? Or did you just go, I like that name, let's work out what the business will do? Was it business first or name first?
A bit of both, really. I think when I started, I was looking for something else to do. I just had my daughter. Before that, I had quite a successful career in the television industry. I was a costume supervisor. So I'd left all that behind when I got pregnant, had Tilda, and then was like, oh, I need to come up with something else to do. So I was kind of scratching around thinking, what can I do? What can I do? So when the business started, it was different to what it is now. It took me a while to settle into what I actually wanted to do.
Yeah.
So I went with a name that didn't tie me to anything. It could move and flex as my ideas changed, and so that's kind of where it came from. So it was the combination of my daughter and her faithful and now somewhat shabby teddy bear.
It's quite strange because I actually, if you were creating a business name now, knowing exactly what your business was going to be, I would probably be saying does what it says on the tin kind of business name, because it just helps you get found and people understand. But actually what you've done is you've started with a really broad name, knowing that actually it gave you that facility to tweak and change your business and to refine it as it went, and that works as well. It really does work. So I want to dig in. I want to go back. I'm sorry, I'm going back to pre-daughter. I'm going back to pre-career because you've dropped that in. Tell us all about what's it like working in TV and seamstress, and tell me all about it.
It's long hours, often out in the rain. It's not as much fun as it sounds like. But it's fun, or it was fun.
I would imagine that there's a lot of work in the preparation before filming. You'll have to be there at the start of the day, you have to be there at the end of the day, and there's a lot of hanging around just in case in the middle.
Yes. I mean, it depends where you are within the team. When I started off as a dresser, which I loved. And actually, with hindsight, maybe I wouldn't have been so desperate to leave when I did leave if I'd stayed with dressing. But I didn't. I moved up through the ranks, and each job is very different in what you do. But yeah, you're there a long time. You're there a good, sometimes an hour and a half before the actors arrive. You're there after they've left for however long you need to be there to get ready for the next day. I mean, some of the period things I did, some of the period dramas.
Can you name drop? Can you name drop a couple that you did?
No.
Are you not allowed to, or do you just not want to?
I kind of prefer not to, because then people start to focus on that and they forget about me and my work and my input into it, and they just want to know about the actor.
Oh no, I wasn't going that far. I just kind of no. I don't actually watch many dramas. Shouldn't say that. Okay, but what that does mean is I can see that means that you had really, really long days.
Yeah.
Actually, a new mum, that would be something that would be really, really hard to go back to.
Really hard. And I mean, lots of people do it, and we've got lots of friends that have done it. But for myself and my husband, he works in television as well, so he's on the set design side of things. It just wasn't the way that we wanted to do it.
Yeah.
Not to say that anybody doing it that way is wrong.
Yeah, no, I get it. I had exactly the same reason for starting my business, that it was I didn't want to be away from the kids that much. I still wanted to do something. I couldn't not do anything, and I wanted to bring in income, and I wanted to earn money, but I wanted to have that freedom and flexibility. But that doesn't mean it's right for everybody.
No, and I think for us, we were both used to working away so much, and obviously that for my husband that continued. So he would be away and would maybe come back, if we were lucky, come back at the weekend. If he didn't, depending on where he was, he might not. So we'd maybe not see him for a month. And I didn't want my daughter to grow up and have both of us not being there. She needed one of us as a constant, to be there and to take her to do things, and to be there to take her to a class after school. Or
how did you go from what you were doing and all those different period dramas to deciding what your business was going to be? In fact, what was your business when you first started it? How did it look at that point?
I'd got quite kind of disillusioned with the industry, and when I left, I just completely cut off from everything. So I stopped sewing. I didn't touch a needle. I didn't do anything. So when I decided I was going to, come up with a new career, I looked outside of sewing. I looked outside of everything that I'd done since the age of 5 and thought, let's go completely different.
Okay.
So I actually went back to college and retrained as a nutritional therapist.
Oh, wow. That's a completely different.
It was completely different. So 3 years of really quite intense training with a newborn baby. And then decided that wasn't for me. So kind of thought, no, do you know what? It was great and I'm glad I did it, but it wasn't what I wanted to do. It wasn't my first love, and it wasn't something that I really knew inside out, like sewing.
Yeah.
So I kind of went back to sewing, and then I scraped around and thought, well, I could do this and I could do that. I could make soft toys. I could, make curtains. So it was all a bit kind of hit and miss to start with.
So once you got back to sewing, is that what you did? You just did a little bit of everything, whatever came your way, whatever was available, you kind of were saying yes to start with.
I did, yeah, and I did a lot of toy making, and thought, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to design my own range of dolls, and they're all going to have their own clothes. And actually, this is probably where it comes from. I'd forgotten I did this, but I started with the dolls and making them little clothes. Yeah. One of the things that I'd always wanted to do when I started in television, my big ambition was to work on the Riddlers or Tots TV or one of those kind of puppet shows where the puppets all had the little clothes. So I kind of went with that and was like, I'm going to make rag dolls, and I'm going to make them their own wardrobe. Then I moved into making matching outfits for the child. So the doll and the child would have a matching dress. And then eventually kind of like the dolls went by the wayside, and I was back into clothes making. Wow. And it kind of, it's kind of snowballed from there. But as I've gone along, I kind of feel like with each year that's passed, it's kind of niched a little bit more. Yeah. And I've narrowed it down until I've ended up where I am.
Oh, wow. So how did you end up where you are? How did you, because it's all very 1940s now, it's all wartime, it's very, very niche. You've kind of gone from quite a few different paths to get really, really focused. Tell me about that.
Yeah, I think, I went with, originally, I knew I didn't want to do modern clothes because I think the techniques that go into making mass-produced modern clothes are not my thing at all. I'm a very traditionalist, and I always was in my career as a costume maker and as a supervisor in the dressing of things, was always very, very traditional. I think because that's how I was taught. A lot of hand sewing, a lot of doing things the old-fashioned way. Modern machines out the window, overlockers, no, none of that. So it kind of it was.
Tell me though, I mean, you've got a gorgeous sewing machine right by the side of you. Would you use that now, or you got slightly more advanced?
No, this is now what I use all the time. This is new to me. Obviously, it's not new. I was on a modern machine, but a very, very basic. It literally went forwards and backwards and did a zigzag. It didn't do anything exciting. It wasn't computerized, nothing. But I was never particularly happy with it. I learnt on an old Singer. I actually learnt one of the hand cranked ones, which is great training because obviously you've only got one hand free. So I learnt to put a zip in with one hand. Which,
wow.
Right, but now I just use this. because
Well,
it's
see, now that amazes me. I literally was saying that as thinking, no, you're going to tell me, well, this is just because it looks nice and I love the look of it. I was not expecting you to say that. So that's wow.
Yeah, no, when I was scouting around at the end of last year for a new machine, I asked in a lot of theatre groups in what people were using in theatres now, and a lot of them came back with the Singer, the 201K. It's the real workhorse. It will go through. I mean, some of the stuff that I do, I use a lot of denim and cotton drill. And once you start doing old-fashioned seams and flat felling things, you can get quite a few layers, and you need something that will go through a good six layers. Wow. And modern machines, just unless you go for an industrial, they just don't do it. Domestic machines are not designed to do it, and this will.
Fantastic. Wow, yeah. I'm kind of still slightly stunned. It's just, yeah, I didn't realise everything was still quite, I knew obviously that your work is very traditional based. It's all 1940s. I knew that final look, but I don't think I realised just how traditional it was or is.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that's because that's how I was taught.
Yeah.
When I first started when I was 5, and I was taught a lot of hand techniques, and that's kind of stuck with me. And it's also this whole thing about, it's about the process as well. It's not about just banging out something. It's about how it's made and actually sitting and enjoying that headspace and that time whilst you're doing it.
Yeah, you're not trying to rush and get this done as quickly as you possibly can. It is about creating a quality product that is made with care and attention.
Yeah. And actually for me, sometimes, I mean, particularly with old clothes, when you look inside, I think the inside is more beautiful than the outside. If you look at all the different techniques that people use to finish the seams off and how things were actually made, it's just, and there's so many stories in there as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the big thing for me. And I think, and just to bring it kind of hone it in even more, I mean, you know, with me, I started off when I got to the point where I was doing period clothes, it was 40s and 50s. Yeah. And then I narrowed it down again because I wasn't quite so interested in the 40s. And now I literally do 1939 to 1945. So I literally do the war years.
Yeah.
But there's so much more than just the clothes wrapped up in there. Things look like they did for a reason. And that whole side of it as well is so interesting. And that's kind of the thing for me now. It's those stories that are stitched into every garment. They're almost as important as the garment themselves. They're more important than the garment themselves.
I love that. So I am going to look backwards to the TV stuff just for a second, not because I'm kind of trying to dig into it, but did you deliberately start working on period stuff within TV? Was that what you were drawn to? Is that history of everything kind of part of who you are, or was that an accident?
I think it started as an accident. It was kind of the way I ended up going. I think I just ended up with a designer that was doing a period thing, and then kind of realized that actually that was a bit more me, because I liked all of the history side of it. Right. And I do daft think honestly, I made a rod for my own back most of the time. I remember once doing a Jane Austen piece, and I decided that each of the main actors was going to have a different knot for their cravat. So they weren't all just going to have a standard knot. Each would have their own, and nobody ever noticed. And the trauma I caused my dressers, because I was like, no, this person must have this knot and you must learn to do it. And half the time they couldn't remember what they were supposed to be doing or who was supposed to have what knot, and then I'd have to come along the time, and it made life very difficult. But it was those details that I really fell in love with. So doing those things.
I presume that means that for that particular Jane Austen, those costumes, you had to go away and do quite a lot of research and kind of go, well, it isn't, as you say, it's the story, it's who would have worn that type of knot to make sure it was the right kind of knot for the right particular character.
Yeah.
Kind of.
There was more of a kind of, I like the look of that one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was all, for me, it's always been little details like that have really pulled me in. Because obviously, like the designer would come up with the main look of the outfit and things, and then I would just come along and.
This is how you're going to make it, I suppose, was your side of it, wasn't it? Is making that idea or reality.
Yeah. My side of things was very much running what was going on set, putting stuff out for people, making sure they were in it, getting them on set, and then making sure the on-set team were okay and it all looked all right.
Let's get back to business, because I was only touching back on that because I just wondered if that was where the love of the history came from or whether you already had the history there. But when
I think it was a bit of both.
So when it comes to 1940s, come and tell me, what do you love about the 1940s? Why did you hone in on that area? What was it particularly? I know you said it's the stories, but is there more to it to that? Because the stories from every era.
There are stories from every era, but if you think about what went on during the war, it wasn't just, most of the time what people wear, it's dictated by fashion and it's dictated by personal choice. You're not going to wear something if you don't like it. But that kind of wasn't the case during the war. Yes, it was still dictated by personal choice to a certain extent, but a lot of it was dictated by the government and the government initiatives. They had to conserve materials and resources, and that had to be controlled by the government. So when the Board of Trade set up the utility scheme, which covered clothing, they set out very clear details of how things would work. So everything was controlled down to the number of buttons, the number of pleats. I mean, I've got the thing here. If you think about in the 1940s, the classic shirt dress, it wasn't just a case of, right, I'm going to design myself a nice little shirt dress there. I've got it written here. It says no more than 5 buttons. You weren't allowed more than 5 buttons. You could only have 2 inverted or 4 knife pleats.
Okay.
Only 2 pockets. If you had a belt on it, it was limited to 5 centimeters or 2 inches. And back to the button thing, no more than 5 buttons unless it was a button through, so button from top to bottom of skirts. But if you did that, there had to be 10 centimeters between each button.
Oh, wow.
So that kind of whole design process was slightly taken away from designers. They had all of this list of specifications in front of them, which they had to stick to. So it kind of meant that fashion became much more wrapped up in everything else that was going on, which I'm sure I'd stand corrected here, but that doesn't happen that often. There can't be that many times in history where that has actually happened. So what's happening in the country, politically, financially, socially, all of those things are really dictating what people wear.
And actually it's really interesting because, I mean, we're recording this during a lockdown, and actually we've got an awful lot of things that are controlled and that we can do and we can't do and we're being told, and there's a lot of rebellion going on in an awful lot of places of fighting it. But actually, can you imagine if right now we were told that actually you can only, if you were wearing a shirt dress, you could only have 5 buttons on it, and the width of your, oh my word, it would be uproar, wouldn't it? Right now we wouldn't stand for it now, but actually back then, the fact that it happened, and not only that, everybody came together and did it and supported it. Wow.
I mean, I think there was a lot of uproar, and there was a lot went on in the background to actually make it happen. And a lot of people were brought on board to try and make it more palatable. But I mean, I know that they had the Women's Institute were kind of there putting out articles saying, no, this is amazing, and you must follow this because this is great, and this is what they do. So there was a lot going on to try and
a lot of propaganda to try and make it a good thing rather than a bad thing. But
I don't think people just rolled over and went, oh yeah, fine, that's what we'll do. But it certainly was quite an unusual time in the history of fashion, and also it changed women's lives moving forward. If you think about before the war, women worked, but not as many women as during and after the war. Trousers became more acceptable during the war because they had to. You couldn't go and work in a factory in a skirt and heels. So it changed so much.
I love, you've got a sentence on your website that says ordinary women did extraordinary things. And I think that sums it up, doesn't it? It's that but everything changed, that norm changed. It's quite ironic as to we seem to be going through it different, but everything normal has changed right now.
Yeah.
But it was dramatically different then, particularly for, I'm going to say particularly for women, for everybody really, but noticeably for women. The whole life changed. You love that era. You love that style. It suits your style of sewing.
Yeah.
So tell us about the products that you do from that and how you earn money from that, because obviously your passion is there, your love is there. But how have you turned that into a business?
Yeah, my products are either, I had some garments that I make from original patterns, and so I'll use the original pattern from them from the 1940s, and then some of my stuff is self-drafted, so I'll take those principles and then I will come up with my own design and my own pattern for it and things. So I have the garment side of things, and then alongside that I'd do a lot of teaching, which is good. So, and I really enjoy that. I didn't think I would. When I was asked if I'd take on a class, I didn't think I'd enjoy it as much as I do, but I really like it. And slowly I'm getting my students to embrace hand sewing. I'm being very sneaky. It's not like a vintage sewing class.
Yeah.
And so they use modern machines, and they like to overlock everything and sew their buttons on with a sewing machine. And slowly I'm getting them to try different ways of doing things.
Do they know that you're sneaking this in? Have you kind of told them that, have you noticed I've snuck this in?
Should they know? No, it's nice because some people really embrace it. Some students have come to me because that's what they want to learn.
Right.
So some people come because they want to learn how to do things differently. They want to learn how to produce things where everything's hand done, and which is great, and that's brilliant. And then I have probably half of the class that are no. I'm not doing it like that.
There's a machine and I want to use the machine.
Yes.
Make it as easy as possible.
Do you know what? There's nothing wrong with that at all. There's absolutely nothing wrong in using your sewing machine to sew a button on for you. It does it. Yeah. So if that's how you want to do it, that's absolutely fine. Yeah. Neither way is right nor wrong. Or
of course not. No, both ways. Anyway works. If it gets the job done, that's the important thing, isn't it? But I love the fact that actually you're helping keep those older skills alive. Yeah. Otherwise, if we're not careful, we'd be completely reliant on a machine for doing it. And what happens on the day there's a power cut if you don't have those other skills?
Exactly. Yeah, I think it's important that we do remember how to do things.
Yeah, there's a place for both completely. It's definitely not either or. How have you been coping with teaching during lockdown? Have you embraced teaching on Zoom?
Yes.
And how's that been?
I wasn't actually sure it would work. When I think it was you that suggested it to me, wasn't it? And I was like, oh gosh. And I kind of, like a lot of things, sewing is it's very hands-on. You've got kind of teaching it. My style of teaching is to show somebody. I can't just stand there and explain to them. I'd rather show them, because I'm the sort of person that learns better if somebody shows me.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of how I teach. If somebody's happy to let me show it, I'll show them how to do it. So how that was going to work on Zoom, I wasn't quite sure, but we gave it a go. We tested it out, and actually it's been really good. It has kind of worked fine. Originally, I just had my class in the group, and we've kind of widened it out a bit now, and it's been quite nice because we've had people back into the group who we had some women that had left because they'd had a baby, so they couldn't come to the class anymore, and suddenly they found they could rejoin. So we've welcomed people back. We've added some new people in, and it's odd. It's a bit, it's not the same. There's a lot of worksheets that go on. I do handouts and things with pictures, but it does kind of work. It's strange how it does work. And once you get over that, I have a big pile of just stuff next to me when I teach, like random bits of fabric and paper, so I can go, oh, well, and I can just suddenly hold something up and go, oh, well, we might do it like this. Yeah. And trying to demonstrate over Zoom is funny. But
you have to embrace it, don't you? You have to laugh. But I suppose in some ways it completely fits in with your business anyway, because back then, the wartime years, it was all about adapting. So this is, again, it's all about adapting.
We've adapted.
Yeah.
So I had one student who'd never put a zip in before. So came to class and said, right, I'm going to make a box cushion this week to cover a seat on a bench. And I want a zip on the back and I want some piping. And I went, oh, heck, this is going to be fun. And she did it.
Brilliant.
I mean, I had to talk her through it but she did it.
And I suppose the advantage is they are using their own machines as well. They are using their own environment. They are, rather than kind of doing something on somebody else's machine and then going back and going, how do I do this on mine now?
Well, also, I think it forces them to actually do it as well. I think when I'm in the class, and I have to say I'm bad for this as well, because I know the ones that don't like hand sewing, if there's a bit of hand sewing to be done, well, they'll say, oh, Becky, can you just do this for me? And I'm like, okay, I'll do it. But this has forced them to do it themselves. So they've become less reliant on me. And I think they've actually improved a lot because they've had to do it themselves. Yeah.
I love that.
And things that they might have tried in the class and thought, I'm not quite confident enough to try this on my own, so I'll try it when I'm with Becky. They've had no option but to try those things on their own. And they've realised that they can do it. They don't actually need me.
Yeah.
They're a lot better than they think they are. And that's brilliant. So I think some of the makes that they're now doing, they're doing much more advanced stuff than they would have been doing.
That's fantastic. I love that.
Good.
I love that.
Yeah.
So
it's become more of a social now as well.
That is the thing, isn't it, as well? I think we need that human connection right now. So I think even if it's on a Zoom session and it's not exactly in person, any opportunity to get together and have a chat and an natter.
Yeah, some weeks there's not that much sewing that goes on. You can tell those weeks, though, because if everybody turns up with a glass of wine, and you're like, okay, there's not much sewing this week, but that's fine. Whatever.
But you're there. If somebody does want to, you're there. They just got to ask, and you're there to show them how. I love that.
Yeah,
like that. We've come to that horrible question that I like to ask. I love marketing. I do. As we've been talking now, I've been going, oh, you should do this and you should do that. You should do the other. That's what my head is firing off and doing. But I know that not many makers do. So come on, marketing. Do you love it or hate it?
I hate it. I'm not very good at it. I can never come up with the ideas. And I'm not one to embrace technology, so having to pootle around trying to work out how to do something just frustrates me. Can't work MailChimp. It took me ages to get to grips with Zoom.
You have. You've done it.
I've done it, yeah, but it takes me a long time and I kind of think I could be doing something better. So no, I hate marketing.
It's quite,
but it needs to be done.
It does need to be done, because if you don't get out and do the marketing, nobody knows you exist and nobody knows that they can buy from you or see you and appreciate your wonderful work or learn from you or whatever they're doing at that moment in time. So the marketing is a kind of like a necessity. So I think, I've got a few ideas. We'll chat just after we finish this, because there was a few things that came into my head as you were going.
But that's why we have you. That's why we love you, because you love the marketing for us.
I kind of hear what you do and I kind of, you need to do this and you need to do that. And you need, not necessarily need, because it's up to you whether you do or not, but those are the ideas that I have. So my next question, last question, you'll be relieved to know, if you had one piece of advice for somebody else who was starting a business around their craft, around their art, what would it be?
I think it would be to just do things your own way, not to get bogged down. This will be totally contradictory to what most people will say to you, not to get bogged down in business plans and research, and just do it. Trust in the journey, go with it and see where it takes you. Because I think, it's taken me a long time to get to where I want to be. But if I'd done it a different way, if I'd written a business plan and if I'd researched starting a business, I would be somewhere completely different. And I've kind of got my experience along the way, and
you grow as you do stuff. You learn the bits as you need to go. I think it's sometimes if you start with a complete business plan, you kind of can put yourself into a complete spin and overwhelm, whereas if it's a kind of a slightly gradual process, you kind of evolve with it.
I think it's also about having the confidence to say, do you know what, that bit's not working.
Yes.
I mean, when I did the nutritional therapy degree, it costs a lot of money to do that degree. To go back to university and do a degree, it costs a lot of money, it costs a lot of time. It had a huge impact on my family, supporting me whilst I did it. So to turn around and say, actually, I'm sorry, darling hubby, that you've just paid for this, but it's not really what I want to do. That wasn't actually an easy thing to do.
No.
And then even once I got back to sewing, to say, right, okay, I've done this, but that's still not right. And you've got to have the confidence to say, this isn't working, I need to move on. And that, I think, would be my biggest piece of advice.
Yeah, know when to move on. But I also think you have got to be careful that you're not being a butterfly and you're not just going from idea to idea to idea to idea to idea to idea. As long as you know in your heart that actually this is completely the wrong thing for me, but this will be the right thing, and you're doing it with the intention of sticking with it and then making a change and making a decision so it evolves as you have done. There's nothing wrong with changing and evolving. It's when it becomes that very, very long-term habit that you actually never settle at anything. And it's kind of like as soon as you get to the serious point of having to kind of go, well, I've got to put myself out there and make money now. Well, that's a bit difficult. I'm going to change. You've got to look for telltale signs. You can't kind of fall into that trap. But I do think that evolving and enjoying the journey and appreciating the journey is a massive part of it. The reason I called a handcrafted business was partly because, yes, I work with crafters and makers and artists and photographers and designers. So it's all about the craft, but also it is about crafting your business. It's not just about your craft. It is about designing a business that you love, that works for you, the business, it makes money, and your customers as well. And I think that completely fits with what you were saying there, that you have to do it your way.
Yeah.
It's got to be right for you.
Yeah. It's no good trying to force yourself into somebody else's box.
No. You're not trying to do all of the platforms. You're not trying to be seen on all of the social media platforms, because if you hate them, you're not going to show up and do them. You're not having to do everything. I know you said you don't like MailChimp. Do need to work with you on that one, because there's a few little things that you do need to do a few things.
Yeah. I've sent out my first newsletter now. So
and it's brilliant. And actually, let's mention your blog. Because one of the things you're doing for your marketing is the Women at War kind of angle. Is what was it you've called it? Diary of a Wartime Woman. That's what you've called it. So tell me a little bit about that just before we close.
Right. So, just to really kind of indulge my love of the history side of things. So I've started writing this blog. The first piece, and it's about women. I think everything that I do, I only make women's wear. I'm really focusing on the women and the stories of the women during the war. So to just follow that through a bit more, I'm telling more of those stories through my blog, which we decided to do as a diary. So each month there's a new diary entry. And in fact, I just went for it and I've made up a little character. And she's joined the Land Army, and we're following her journey through the Women's Land Army and how she coped with that and being away from home for the first time. So all of those kind of themes that affected women so much are all going to be explored through my blog. And it just allows me to explore the history side of it a little bit more.
Which I think is both part of your passion and part of your love, but it's also is what connects you with your ideal audience and your customers. Because reality is you're not going to have somebody who has zero interest in wartime in 1940s who wants to buy a garment or learn how to sew a particular item from you. So
I'm not. But also it connects me. It connects me with my audience, but it connects me with the clothes as well.
Yes. Yeah.
Which is really important.
Yeah.
It kind of shows that I'm not just plucking a design from nowhere and that's what I'm banging out.
Yeah.
I hope that that's what people get from it, that actually that each piece that I do is I don't like the phrase lovingly handcrafted, because I think it's not very descriptive, but you know what I mean? It kind of, it shows the thought process, and that there is actually some love and some blood, sweat and tears that have gone into each piece.
You haven't just randomly pulled a pattern off someone else's shelf and made it without any thought to the fabric or the stitches that you use or anything. It's all planned, it's all thought out.
Yeah, there's some thought gone into it, in the same way that thought went in to the design originally back in the 40s. There's thought gone into now each piece that I'm making. Yeah. And I think it's also brings it into the present as well, in that I think we need to get people out of the habit of buying a £1 t-shirt and then tossing it away when it gets a hole in it. I heard the expression the other day, loved clothes last. And I absolutely love that expression, because I think it's true. If you connect to an item that you've bought and you absolutely love it, you're going to look after it, and then you're going to repair it when it gets a hole, and you're going to have to learn how to repair it. So you're going to learn some of those techniques so that you can repair it. And that piece is going to see you for generations.
I love that. I think that's the perfect time to finish, because I think that's amazing. Yeah, loved clothes last, and that's what you stand for. It represents everything that you do in so many ways. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Becky. It's been lovely to chat. I will make sure that I drop the links to your website, your Etsy store and your social media, so that people can sign up and see, and make sure they don't miss out on any of your fabulous blogs about wartime women. Speak to you soon.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.